It's not fair. You ever say that growing up? It's not fair. I am the oldest of two brothers. I said that a lot. We were consumed growing up with fairness and equality for ourselves. My brothers and I, we had made up rules to instill fairness and equality for just about everything. How you watch TV and who had the remote control, how you cut a piece of cake and who got to pick the slice. I had a brother that had a really unfortunate nickname for many years. We called him Temper Boy because for years it seemed like we couldn't play a board game or a backyard game without him quitting as soon as he deemed the game being unfair. The three of us had rules about who had control of the radio, who got to ride in the front seat. You had to say shotgun, and our mom had to hear it, and you got to ride from the time you left until the time you returned. See, lots and lots of rules. I didn't get to sit in the front seat of the car for years because my baby brother would wake up and the first words out of his mouth were shotgun. We were consumed with fairness. Everything. It's like we had a built-in little radar, always looking out to making sure that we were getting our fair share of things. And our parable today is about fairness. There is an element of fairness in this story. The workers in the vineyard are mad because the vineyard owner isn't being fair. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be preaching on some of the parables from the Gospel of Matthew. And this is one of the stories that Matthew has. It is the story known as the parable of the workers in the vineyard. Of course, Jesus isn't telling us a story about how to be a good employee of a vineyard. He's telling us a story about God, about who God is, about the very nature of our God. And so as you listen to this story today, I hope it makes you uncomfortable. I hope you hear how unfair this story truly is. It's in Matthew chapter 20, beginning in verse 1, and I invite you to read along with me as I read this parable. Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever's right.' So they went. When he went out again about noon, about 3 o'clock, he did the same. At about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they had received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last only worked 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." In the early morning hours, the vineyard owner goes and gets workers, and he agrees to pay them the usual daily wage. Everyone's happy. At about 9 o'clock, he goes out, he gets more workers, tells them he'll pay what's right. The new workers are happy. They join the workers that have already been at work since dawn. And sure enough, before long, the vineyard owner goes out and gets more workers. He goes at noon. He goes at 3, back and forth. He goes and gets more workers all afternoon. And eventually, it's 5 o'clock, just an hour before quitting time, and another truckload of workers is pulling up. Let's face it, these 5 o'clock arrivals were probably not the pick of the litter. Maybe they were passed over for a reason. Maybe they just didn't get up early enough to get there to start their work day. Who knows? They arrive at 5 o'clock and they are thrilled. At least they're getting an hour of work in. And maybe by the end of the day, they'll have enough to buy themselves dinner. At least it'll be a little change in their pocket. And at 6 p.m., the whistle blows. It's quitting time. And if you are keeping score, there are people who have worked 12 hours, 9 hours, 6, 3, and 1 hour. You want to keep everyone straight, of course. So everybody lines up, the ones that just arrived with the ones that have been there for 12 hours. And those 5 p.m. arrivals hold out their hands, and they cannot believe their good fortune. A whole day's wage. A whole day's wage for 1 hour of work. They are thrilled. And can you imagine the excitement as the rumble goes down the line? Because if the 1 hour workers are getting a full day's wage, the people at the end of the line are doing the math and imagining what they are about to take home, and they are thrilled. Wow, this is a generous vineyard owner. But the happiness quickly fades into rumbles and resentment as one by one, each person holds out their hand and they receive that same daily wage. It's not fair. It's not fair. Are you kidding me? The people that just showed up are getting the same amount of money as the people with their backs breaking and sunburned from being out there all day in the sun. It makes them mad. And the irony here is that they got what they had expected to receive. They got exactly what they planned on getting. In fact, if they didn't know what everybody else was getting, they probably would have gone home at the end of the day and felt pretty good and gone home happy as a clam. But instead, they compare. And it's the comparison that really gets them into trouble here. What's that expression? Have you heard this expression, comparison is the thief of joy? I thought of that this week. Comparison is the thief of joy. Seeing that the latecomers get just as much as the people who've worked for 12 hours steals their joy. They are furious. In some ways, this moment in the story is a reminder to us all of the dangers of living our lives, constantly comparing our life to everyone else's lives. Social media is horrendous for this. It's so easy to start spending your life looking around, wondering how everyone else is measuring up and comparing your life to everyone else's. I know I've told you all this story before, but it just fits so perfectly. I had to mention it today. This little story about a woman who she liked to drink her coffee and eat her breakfast at the kitchen table where she had a big window in the back of her house. And she would sit at that table and she would look out her window and she would see her neighbor. Sorry, I don't know where I went real southern there for a second. I don't know what happened there. Window. And she'd sit out there looking at people hanging their laundry out. And she was watching her neighbors, and she would say, you know what? Golly, their laundry is filthy. They're hanging out their laundry, and it is dirty as can be. These people don't know how to do laundry. If this is what they think is clean, just imagine what they keep their house like. Oh, she was horrified. She told her husband that these neighbors of ours just really must be slobs. Week after week, she'd look out their laundry and just judge them. And then one day, She goes to get her coffee and sit at her kitchen table, and she looks out her window and she sees shiny, clean clothes on the line. And she tells her husband, well, what do you know? Somebody must have finally shown our neighbors how to do laundry. And he said, no, I just cleaned the kitchen windows. It's so easy. It's so easy to spend our lives looking at everyone else's, telling ourselves they have bigger, better, shinier, easier, the perfect house, the perfect marriage, the perfect kids that never talk back. If we aren't careful, we can spend our lives looking at everybody else, trying to see how everybody else's dirty laundry is, and we forget to look within, to look at our own hearts, to look at our own lives. It's so easy that we can actually miss the good gifts of God in our lives, right in the midst of our lives, because we're so busy comparing ourselves to other people. And meanwhile, those 12-hour workers are furious. They didn't earn it. It's not fair. While the ones who showed up at 5 o'clock, they cannot believe the gift they have received. They are thrilled. Do me a favor. When you hear this story, when you listen to this story, raise your hand with me for a moment if you automatically picture yourself as the one who worked 12 hours. Anybody here? I always do. Oh, there's a few honest people. The choir, thank you. I always immediately picture myself as the one with the tired back and the sunburn being so mad that I didn't get more. I always picture myself as the one who's worked for 12 hours. One preacher wondered why so many of us immediately picture ourselves as the ones who've been working all day instead of the ones who show up for an hour. She writes, when we read this parable, why do we tend so immediately to identify with the folks hired at the crack of dawn? Why do we so readily assume that when God's kingdom fully comes, we will be the ones tempted to feel upset that we have also be shown to be the hardest workers of all? Who told you or me that we've been working for 12 hours? How do we know that just maybe our work totals the measly 1 hour after all? Could we be the ones who haven't worked as hard for the vineyard owner as we'd like to think we have? Could that be us? Could we be the ones depending upon the generosity of the vineyard owner? It's called grace. And maybe this morning we need to remember that we all need it. To stand at the front of the line with our hand out in awe and wonder at the generosity of the gift. A gift that we know we can't earn or ever deserve. It's grace. It's grace for the 12-hour workers who are resentful, just sure that they have done all the heavy lifting for the others. It's grace for the ones who are just astounded by the generosity of the gift, who cannot believe their joy. The good news for all of us is that His grace is for us. His grace is for you. The founder of Methodism, John Wesley, I love this little story about John Wesley. He was once physically thrown out of a church after preaching a sermon about grace. And after his quick, abrupt exit from that church, he wrote in a letter to a friend of his about what happened. And in that he writes, "There's no Christian doctrine more repugnant than the affirmation that we are saved by the grace of God." He's right, isn't he? Thanks be to God. He's right. Amen.